On your computer or smartphone, you can view or hear us by typing in WCEG talkradio.com. And then in your browser, hit enter. And on the next screen, click the live stream tab. Now, if you have a smart TV, not a dumb one, but a smart one, that means you have one that doesn't have antennas in it, just click on the YouTube icon and search for WCEG Network. And then look for issues and answers and my handsome face and boop, hit it. Now, WCEG stands for Worldwide Community Empowerment Group. Our programming goal is to leave you more informed and more empowered than you were before you tuned in. Our motto, we speak life into the community. You may like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and on Instagram at WCEG_talk_radio and at WCEG Network. Disclaimer, and pardon the interruption, I'll explain that. The topics and opinions on issues and answers are those of moi, Norman A. Carter Jr., and my guest, and not the WCEG Network. So just leave my bosses alone. This is my show. These are my words and the words of my guests. And that little noise you may have heard in the background, I believe that was one of our guests trying to get in. She is having trouble coming in on the network. That would be Miss Coleman, Crystal Coleman. So hopefully she'll be able to try and come in. Before I speak to our guests, I just have a few comments, and it's funny because I usually have a prepared statement that I get into, and I do, but I just think about recent things that happened recently. News article from the Chicago Crusader. This is about 2 weeks ago, and it says something about Black drivers in Chicago were stopped 7 times more than whites in 2020. And it goes on and on and on, and it is horrendous. 7 times more. And I don't want to get into the numbers. If I can put this before you and you can just look at that and maybe get an idea. If you're reviewing it, freeze it and look at it. The numbers are horrible, but it reminded me of a portion of my autobiography where I talk about a party that I went to, and it was all African-American police officers and their wives. And we were rookies not too long out of the academy. And these police officers were bragging about how many tickets they wrote. And for the Picayune, hello, Crystal, we see you. Thank you. And about the tickets, the number of tickets that they wrote, sometimes multiple violations on people. And I was alarmed because this is not what I came on the police department for. And many of these African-American police officers came from the same community. In fact, one of them went to Edison High School with me. So I could not understand that. And I got into a little bit of an argument with them about that. And I'll explain a little bit more about that later, but I talk about that extensively, but I'll get into that a little bit more in the program. But that was distressing to me, absolutely distressing. And one of the things that I'll start off before I introduce my illustrious guest, the more things change, the more things stay the same. This is an old idiom that sadly rings true in today's law enforcement and its relationship to its communities. In the 1960s, people in African-American communities viewed police officers as part of the oppressive mechanism of the United States government. As a new activist, I took this as both a challenge and an opportunity. It is more difficult to change a system from outside than it is to change it from within. So that was my reasoning, and that's why I chose to become a police officer. As a child, I saw a man brutally beaten by police officers. The whole thing started over a family domestic dispute. But this guy obviously had what we used to call in North Philadelphia the Rams. And the Rams happen when people drink a little bit too much alcohol and they just lose it, they lose control. And they're very difficult to, they're just become wild and energized. That was a condition that stayed with me throughout my childhood and guided me throughout my police career. I wanted, when I became a cop, I wanted to be respected and not feared. Fear only exacerbates situations that could be resolved via calm conversations. Fear leads to verbal and physical abuses that are unnecessary. Fear is often generated when people are exposed to slanted or ill-informed views about people who come from environments different than their own. During the summer of 1967, more than 150 cities erupted into violence. I don't want to get into a whole thing about that, but we had something similar to that happen just last year. So, and we had the National Advisory Commission on Civil Disorders in 1968 and several other commissions. Bringing us more up to date in 2020, after several incidents of police shootings, news conferences showed many peaceful demonstrations which served to vilify and demonize all police officers. This was the same type of behavior that occurred in the 1960s and 1970s. The more things change, the more things stay the same. What I found alarming was a peaceful demonstration in downtown Atlanta, and it may have happened in other cities, where police officers were lined up to prevent demonstrators from destroying private property in downtown Atlanta. Cowardly, and I'll call them that, demonstrators used this as an opportunity in the middle of a pandemic to stand a few inches away from police officers, to yell and spit in their faces. Those police officers, many of whom were African American, remained stoic and did not react. Now, every major police department in this country is understaffed. Recruitment of African American police officers is essential, but difficult because of the demonization of all police officers, especially by fake activists in African American communities. And that's my little monologue there before I get here and introduce my illustrious guests. Please pardon me, but I just had to set the foundation for our program. Our first guest is familiar to many of you. He is Mr. William Blackman. He was with us in, I believe, in February, late February, early March. Mm-hmm. Yes. Mr. Blackman is the Northeast Regional Coordinator for Survival Outreach Services. He was a first sergeant in the Pennsylvania Army National Guard. He is a retired Philadelphia Police Sergeant. He has a Bachelor of Science degree in Business Administration, Master of Science degree in Organizational Leadership and Management from Pierce College. And I do believe he's the past president of the Guardian Civic League, if I am correct. And also a near lifelong acquaintance and friend of mine. We go back many, 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 many years. And next, but certainly not least, Ms. Crystal Williams-Coleman, president of the Guardian Civic League of Philadelphia. Now, she hails from Harlem in New York City, attended Miami-Dade Community College. So she's been all over the East Coast, y'all. She joined the Philadelphia Police Department in 1986. After 32 years of service, somehow she got a clue and decided to retire. Um, her career included 11 years in the Special Victims Unit and 16 years in the Homicide Unit, where she retired as a detective. She has been featured on the nationally televised program 48 Hours and on features on the ID channel. As I said before, she is president of the Guardian Civic League of Philadelphia, which is an organization of predominantly African-American police officers. She is also the vice chairperson of the National Association of Black Law Enforcement Officers. Welcome, welcome, my guests. Welcome.
Thank you.
So
Thank you,
glad to have you.
Thank you.
Crystal, I was about to shed a tear when you were having trouble coming in.
I know, but I got on.
So glad to have you. So glad to have you both. You may have heard my little introduction, and in light of what's going on, and I know you both of you have slightly different perspectives, but as I said before, the more things change, the more things stay the same. And I'm sure that both of you can identify with the issues. Now, how do you recruit African Americans to become police officers?
Want to go first, Bill?
No, Crystal, I'm
going to go right to you.
Well, this is my take. I was asked that question by the Philadelphia Tribune, and I told them, yes, it's kind of hard with the pandemic. It's kind of hard with what's going on out there. But my thing is to these young people, if you want to see change, then you have to come on and help make the change. Let's not be so negative about things. Oh, I don't want to be a police officer because I see what they did. Well, come on, come on and try to make that change. So I say that is the way to recruit them.
Absolutely. Bill?
Yeah, Norma, and I have to agree with Crystal. Like you, I made my decision early in life to join the Philadelphia Police Department. And I wanted to join mainly because I wanted to make change. And I've always believed that you can't make change on the outside. You can make change better on the inside. And along with a number of individuals after I got on the department, you included, with those who were with the Guardian Civic League at that time, John Green, Harold James, Alfonso Deal, and some others, we came up with a plan to make change and to get more African Americans on the police department. And that one thing that we did, we boycotted one of the mayors at that time, Bill Green's breakfast.
Right.
And that started our roll on to get a consent decree to get more African Americans on this job. But I've always believed, some of my friends who I grew up with, some of the guys I went to school with in Edison, they joined other organizations, and some of them we lost friendships for a while. But I explained to them, you can't make change in the police department on the outside. You can only make change on the inside. And that's where I think it starts from.
I totally agree. Bill, you and I came from basically the same environment. Right about, well, maybe you're a bit younger than I am, but anyway. but we saw a lot of the things. We saw our neighborhoods destroyed.
Yes.
Especially in 1964. I remember I was in the Army then. I was at Fort Belvoir, and I remember tears just flowing in my eyes when I'm sitting there in this room with all white soldiers, and to see my neighborhood destroyed. And I'm from right there in the 23rd Master, just terrible. So based on your personal experiences, what are the challenges that you see in actually, after you get on and being an African-American police officer? And I threw this out to Crystal first, so Bill, I'm going to drop this in your lap.
Well, Bill go first?
The question would be, what are the challenges during your career during your career? Not so much. It's a hill to climb just to get people to be recruited, but I think that when we're talking to people that we're trying to recruit, they want to know, what did we go through? What can I expect?
Well, Norman, I think today's policing is a lot different than when I came on the department. I came on the department in 1970. At that time, it was very little, very little African-American police officers. My class, we had 11 Black officers in it, and that was a lot. I know other classes only had one Black officer in it. There were no females in the classes when we came through the academy. So there was a lot of trying times. I think I was fortunate because one of the things that I said to them when I was in the academy is, I want to go to North Philly to work. Of course, I grew up in North Philly, and I knew my people. But it was difficult. It still was difficult because people didn't trust Black police officers. I don't care who you were, they still didn't trust you.
Right.
Once again, I go back, I got fortunate because I'm in North Philly. I meet Harold James, who was one of the vice president of the Guardian Civic League. He took me under his wing. Some of the other African-American officers took me under their wings. And then I got to know different members, Black officers. That's was the key to my surviving in the police department and my listening to those officers. I always talk about a story that Ronald Johnson and Graham said to me, Tommy Graham said to me one day, there was a detail, they wanted to send me down to South Philly to 29th Street. And
been there, yeah.
Well, I was sick of this detail. I didn't like going down there. And I said, I'm going to take off sick. And they grabbed me to the side and they said, listen, they have more details than you got sick time. I understood that meaning right there. So I took that detail. But being Black, you didn't have the community at the time. And then something happened with the Guardian Civic League. Really got energized, and we started going into the community and getting the community behind us. And that was a big difference. Life's changed as far as I was concerned in the police department. And then the consent decree comes on, and there was a huge number of Black police officers coming on the department, along with females. And we started really loving each other.
Gotcha.
I think the key is we had to love each other first and respect each other so we can also respect our community. And
I want to get into
and all the presidents after that followed in line, making sure we understood the community first, and our folks on the department understood the community, and things started changing for us.
I want to get to that.
Things are different.
You mentioned that consent decree. Very important. And I think one thing is I was going to wait a little bit later to bring it out. We do have a question of where Black officers allowed to arrest whites. I've got a story in my book about an incident like that. I hate to recall that. That's going to get me like a little bit off contract. And we'll talk about that in a minute.
Okay.
But the consent decree. And I think obviously both of you were benefactors in some way. No, well, you just before you, after you, because and this is relevant to what's going on now. The Fraternal Order of Police spent hundreds of thousands of dollars joining the city and the police department in fighting policies that would have brought in more Blacks, more Blacks and minorities, reflective of the communities that they worked in, and also women being put in positions such as on patrol, in supervisory positions, in special units like the Homicide unit, sex crimes unit and other units, the Fraternal Order of Police fought that tooth and nail. And this was at a time when cities all over the country were losing these suits. They were losing them all over this country, and they were changing them. I know Atlanta here was one of the first. Georgia was one of the first cities to put women on in the patrol duty. I took a picture of one like many years ago, but the Fraternal Order of Police is not the friend of minorities to this very day, and Crystal, I have to let you speak to how much of an aid or a hindrance they have been to you as a female.
Well, first of all, I want to thank the consent decree, because that's the only reason why I was on this job when I came on. It's because of that. And I have to thank Mr. Blackman, because he's the one that brought me into the Guardian Civic League back then. He is my mentor, Mr. Black. But back when Trump was running, since I was already retired, I spoke out and had a press conference and spoke against the National Fraternal Police because they were endorsing Trump, and said we all was endorsing Trump. And that's not true, because the members of the Guardian Civic League was not endorsing Trump. So I had a press conference in which I stood outside and I said, we are endorsing Biden and Harris. And when the Fraternal Order of Police gets on it, they try to interject as if all of us are speaking for what they are, and we are not. Mm-hmm. And a lot of my members call me up and they say, why are they saying all of us? When we go out into the community, they look at us as if we're endorsing what they say.
Correct.
So whenever they do, I try to come out and say, no, that's not what we are doing.
And this is basically, and I didn't want to get into a whole conversation about the Fraternal Order of Police, but it's so relevant to what's going on today, because when you're reaching out to African Americans to join policing, and the voices that they hear, many of the voices that they hear are the Fraternal Order of Police. You see police officers killing Black people for terrible reasoning. Mm-hmm. And you'll see an FOP representative on national TV proclaiming how innocent this officer should be, and they're the victims of bad press and all that sort of stuff. And we in the community, we know that's not true. Mm-hmm. And there's no voice except for an organization like the Guardian Civic League, which has an awful time getting anyone in the national media to listen to you.
You're correct.
You've got the Tribune.
Yeah, but
you may get the Enquirer.
You may
get the Enquirer, but you're not going to get people. And this was one of the things that I when I talked about these commissions that happened in 1968 at the orders of President Lyndon Johnson. And one of the things that this article said is that the Kerner Commission, and I don't know whether any of you guys know about that, but it was the Kerner Commission. It was a National Advisory Commission on Civil Disorders. And that was based on all the riots that we had back in the 60s. And they formed a commission. The commission was comprised of lawmakers and law enforcement officials. That's it. And when I say the more things change, the more things stay the same, is that there's no reaching out for grassroots people like us, you, who have both experienced both and have been doing community outreach work. We'll get a little bit more to that currently. I want to touch on that also. But you come from the community, you have expertise, not as a law enforcement executive. Neither of you are both proud police professionals, let me say that. and both of you have served honorably, but you're not quoting any company line. And that's what these law enforcement officials, I hate to say this, but and I want this to go out publicly, that whenever, I won't say whenever, the majority of the time you get law enforcement executives on a commission, they're quoting the company line. They're not relating to people in the community. And how can you have a commission on civil and human rights and not have people from those communities? How do you expect things to change? This also is an impedance to recruiting, and that's the one thing I'm trying to get through with this meeting, because there's been this wholesale demonizing of police officers that includes African Americans, because what people don't realize is that you cannot get an African American police officer anywhere, and it doesn't make sense, but they would lose their job if they stood up and said, John Q. officer was guilty of police brutality. I saw it. I was standing next to him. I saw him do it, and this is my personal protest. Well, you would automatically lose your job. But we see these things as leaders. We're, especially you, Crystal, you're in close contact with current not only police officers, but some very high police executives.
Mhm.
And what is your opinion collectively, not about anyone individually, that you're getting from the African American police community about what's going on, not only in Philadelphia in policing, but also in this country?
Well, in
Well,
this
Norman, I'll let Crystal speak on an issue or just what you just talked about. There was a young lady up in New York, officer,
right. I was going to talk about her.
who and I'll have to let Crystal go from there. She'll know what I'm talking about.
Okay.
Yeah, her name is Miss Horn in Buffalo. And it's called the Horn Carroll's Law. And I often, when I talk, and I've been preaching this, I would like to see that law come here, because she got a law passed to intercede when another officer is using excessive force, protects the whistleblower cops, and provide protection for officers who intervene or report other officers. Now, she intervened that 14 years ago, some time ago, when her partner was choking this Black man. And lost her job for 14 years. And she fought that fight. She is my hero. She fought that fight for 14 years. And now there's a law in Buffalo for exactly that. And she finally got her pension. I feel that all cities should have that law. So the officers they have some sort of protection, like when they call out other officers that do misconduct out there. I spoke at the hearings for police reform about this particular law 2 weeks ago at Temple University. State Representative Donna Bullock asked me to come out and speak, because I feel this is important. When I was on the job, I didn't have a problem, because I'm not scared. It takes courage, but I wasn't scared to speak out. And they knew that, and they knew I was part of the Guardian. And believe me, they never did anything in front of me, because I wasn't afraid to lose my job or they do something to me. I was not afraid of none of that. When they started using that misuse of the computer, doing those racial slurs they call dome lights.
Yes.
And we took the Guardian civically, took them to court and sued and won. I was down there every day with the president, which was Rochelle Bilal. I was down there every day. And the city asked me my name. I gave my name, badge number, and anything else I had to give, and wanted them to try to do something. But they never did.
Could you explain that to our listeners, many of whom are not in Philadelphia? about the misuse of computers?
Well, there was a group of officers that would get on dome lights. They call themselves dome lights. They would get on there and they do these emails or whatever and talk about racist things such as, oh, see those monkeys in the swimming pool. There was this country club where these black kids went into the pool. They called them black monkeys. Now, these are police officers saying this.
Mm-hmm.
Or they said such things as saying the president, who was at the time Rochelle Blau, needs to be raped, all this kind of stuff. But we fought that because these are the police, the ones that's supposed to protect and serve, out there doing racial slurs on the computer where everybody else could see these racial slurs. And we took them to court.
How many were fired?
I doubt if any were fired.
Or disciplined?
They were disciplined. I'll say that. They were disciplined. And we won a chunk of money. Mm-hmm. And we won training. But other than that, none of them were fired that I know of.
And they're serving the community right now. Or not serving the community, serving in the community.
In the community.
One thing I'd like to mention here before we get too much further is that I am a board member of the Whistleblower Project under an organization called the Lamplighters Project. And we are actively lobbying Congress. We're actually have representatives speaking to people in Washington, D.C., congressmen and senators, about protections for whistleblowers. And the law that you brought up, that's part of our presentation. So we're actively working on that. Of course, it's meeting with resistance from the GOP side of the aisle, but just calling it what it is. But it's something that really needs to be done.
Yes, it does.
And I think the public, and I'm glad you brought this up, that the public does not understand that it takes a lot of courage to do that.
It does.
And when you speak up, you're generally left alone. You're left
that
alone.
Is absolutely correct. Norman.
And that's correct.
As you know, we go back with Alfonso Deal when he spoke up by the beating with the MOVE organization members getting beat by the police.
Yes.
Unfortunately, there was no whistleblowing, and you also had an administration that supported the police, 100% behind the police on beating the MOVE members. So we had to go out and walk with a police officer on duty to make sure he did not get hurt while he was doing his job.
I was one of them.
And Alfonso Deal was not afraid of anybody. It's that we knew that we needed to protect him because he may have gotten shot.
Yes.
That's how Alfonso Deal was. He just, and that's why I say a good mentor and a person you learn from, and you take, and when you look things you learn is how to stand up, like Crystal was saying, because like you just said, Norman, when you stand up, believe me, they don't bother you. They are so afraid of you because they know this is a real man. This is not a boy, not a child. That's a man, and that man cares about his community, and that's the kind of people they actually respect you more when you stand up for your own people.
Let me put a little tiny bit of a background into Alfonso Deal, and many of our listeners probably don't know about him. Alfonso Deal was just a police officer in Philadelphia. He was a leader in the Black community in Philadelphia, but he was just a police officer. Other people realized his leadership qualities, and he left the Philadelphia Police Department on leave for about a year or two to be police commissioner. Was it in New Orleans? Mississippi. So I want to say it wasn't Philadelphia, Mississippi, was it? But
I want to say it was Philadelphia, Mississippi.
Yes,
but
I think
not positive.
Yes, but he left there to be acting police commissioner for a year, then came back to Philadelphia. Couldn't be anything more than just a police officer here in Philadelphia. Here he was a police commissioner somewhere else. This to show you how things are. But also there was an incident where Bill just mentioned about the MOVE organization, where he stood up and said that the police department treated them brutally, and he was sanctioned by the Fraternal Order of Police, and he went to the Fraternal Order of Police to get rid of the sanctioning that had been heaped upon him, and several of us Guardian members went down there, and the Fraternal Order of Police hall was predominantly white police officers. He had a couple on the board, but that was African Americans. That was very relevant. But after he made his statement and his challenge to the FOP and was basically shouted out of the meeting, we decided to leave. What happened is, as we decided to walk out, there were about somewhere between 13 and 15 of us who went down there with Alfonso. As we were about to leave, and this is upstairs in the room, you had two beefy Fraternal Order of Police members block the exit door for us to get out. And the only thing that saved us from getting into a major fight was somebody yelled upstairs and said, "Hey, the press is down here." Where Alfonso, who was never shy around cameras or reporters and knew what he was going to do, prearranged to have the press there for a press conference after that meeting. And that's the only thing that saved us from getting into a major fight at the Fraternal Order of Police. And we're mentioning in the Fraternal Order of Police, they figure a whole lot into this. They figure a lot. We're talking about recruiting. We're talking about promotions. We're talking about quality of life. And at every step of the way, they have taken steps to make life a little bit more difficult for African Americans and for females. Another question I would like to pose is for Crystal, who is the president of the Guardian Civic League, and also like to mention again, vice chair of the NABLEO.
Gabrielle.
Yes. Can you tell us some things about the community outreach programs that the Guardian Civic League is involved in?
Well, the pandemic, of course, has hindered us a little bit now, but we're gradually coming back with our programs. But we've had such things as the one-day boot camp from children from 11 to 17, where we took them and let them experience what it felt like getting locked up. Actually took them down there and gave them a cheese sandwich on top of it so they could see what it feels like when you do these things, what happens to you. We've done that. We have done the Thanksgiving baskets, of course. We have done the food giveaways alongside with the sheriff's office since the pandemic, because a lot of people in the beginning needed food. So we've done that. We've had a Postmasters Club, a youth Postmasters Club down here where they teach people how to speak. And lately I've contacted the recruitment because I see that a lot of us are having problems passing the reading level to get on the police department. So I contacted the captain in recruitment and said, well, maybe we can contact CCP, which is community college, and maybe we can get a program where we can try to, for people that want to get on and try to build up their reading skills, their comprehensive level. We're kind of working on that.
Woo. That's heavy.
Yeah, but
yes.
We want to see some of our Black officers get on this job. Some of these they need, and it's a great job, believe me. It's a great job. It's good benefits. And it's something that we need in our community. I've also fought them on the issue of they want to bring officers outside the city in here, but I don't feel that's right because they're not vested in our community. They'll do their job and go about their business. They're not invested on the community itself. So those are just some of the things that we do. We give away scholarships to our members, children. We do quite a bit in the community as well with our members.
We have a question that came up, and they wanted to know: is Noble still relevant?
Well, Noble is still
National or
around.
Yeah, can you explain? Noble is the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives.
Executive. Yes.
Yes.
Well, I've never been a part of that, so maybe Bill can explain it. I don't know.
Noble started after the National Black Police Association was formed, but 2 years after the National Black Police Officers Association was formed. Noble, whose members were at that time coming to our conferences, they spent off and started Noble. At that time, you had to be, I believe, captain in the bug to be a member of Noble.
Mm-hmm.
They have now dropped the thing down, I think, to lieutenants, Crystal.
Yes.
Down
Yes.
to lieutenants.
Yes.
That's the most I can say about Noble, because you don't really hear them speaking out against injustice. Once again, Norm, just like you said earlier, these are the executives, and the executives normally take the city's position and try to break it down to a lower level, but still on the city's position. Very, very, and I have yet, and I've been around with Noble when they first formed. I have yet to hear them come out against a real issue, against any type of police brutality.
I sort of made the mistake that immediately after my book was printed, I sent a copy or two to Noble, to the leadership in Noble. And I was soliciting a response from them because I thought that the impact of the book should it could have been relevant to police departments all over the country, because a lot of things are not, I'm finding out more and more, are not just happening in Philadelphia. They're happening in Atlanta, Los Angeles, New York, everywhere. And I was surprised at the silence. There was no response back at all, period. And I sent a correspondence to, I can't think of, she was a president or a high official in Noble. It's a female. She's a college professor. I have to look in my notes to find out who it was. But also, same thing, no response. It was almost as if there's no interest in them getting involved in anything that would appear to be controversial. And for me, for us as African Americans, that makes you nothing more than a social club.
That's correct.
If you're not doing any type of community outreach that people can look at and touch, and you would think that a organization of national Black law enforcement executives had some sort of political pull somewhere, some had a voice somewhere, knew a reporter somewhere who could put their story out there, but obviously not.
No.
Or not
No,
that
they would be what you would call, when the administrations need to hear something from Blacks in reference to an issue, that's the ones they will contact, because they know they're going to give the administration side and not the Crystal side. See, the Crystal side and the administration side is completely opposite.
right.
Crystal's going to speak the truth. Whether she was still on the job or not, she's going to speak the truth. And that's not what they want to hear. They do not want to hear Bill Blackman beat this person.
Right.
They want to hear this person did such and such, and that's the reason why we had to put him in custody.
And you see, this is the problem. One of the problems we're having has to be in recruiting young people. Now, I really think it's admirable, number one, that you're going for this program to enhance the reading skills of applicants. I think that is fantastic. We had a little conversation off the air about that. How to some extent, it's not necessarily the individual, but the educational system that they come from that adversely affects their ability to succeed on things like examinations for jobs such as police officers, nurses, getting admitted to colleges or getting admitted to a professional school. Um, Someone wanted to says, well, so Noble was never relevant. Well, I think that at some point Noble was relevant, but and I'm trying to reach out. I think it was relevant in that our Black leaders, police executives who succeeded had no group that wanted them. You certainly couldn't go to the Police Benevolent Association or the Fraternal Order of Police, and there was Noble. Now, unlike NABLEO, which I want to repeat that because this is important because I want people to know it. Excuse me, it is the National Association of Black Law Enforcement Officers. And among that group, you have, I'm not going to say militant people, but I will say, as Bill said, you have people who will speak the truth. And it's hard to get the truth out there from people such as President Crystal, Sergeant Bill Blackman. We've had people on other show, on our previous show, Bill. These are great resource people for anybody who is interested in changing things as far as policing and law enforcement and its relations, law enforcement officers' relationships with their community. You guys are the people they need to be talking to. Absolutely. And here you have an idea, Crystal. I don't know whether that came out of your head or whether it was a group thing where you said, maybe we need to help these people with their reading skills and comprehension skills. That is just awesome.
Well, I can remember a time when I came, one year, that Bill, didn't they used to have a practice test down at the Guardian? When I first came on.
Yes, we had it not only at the Guardians, we had it throughout the churches.
Right,
There were a number of churches. Norman, and Norman, you had to remember that when this is around the consent decree time.
Right.
We had churches, we had school teachers with us.
Mm-hmm.
Who volunteered. Yes.
All volunteers.
Yes.
Helping and assisting us to prepare the young folks to take the test, because we had to get a certain now. We John and Harold and all of us talked. We wanted to get a certain number of African Americans to take that test, because the more you had to take the test, the more you got on the job.
Correct.
And we also wanted to not just have them just come in and show up. We wanted them to be prepared to pass the test. And that was a key. And Crystal just built up all for something she remembered to help. And by the way, the start of that program was, of course, John Green, who was the president at the time. But John Green was also in charge of the recruitment unit. The recruitment unit started the program. He was put in charge of the recruitment unit for the Philadelphia Police Department, but he brought a program to the Guardian Civic League and built off of that. The recruitment unit today do not function the way it used to function, of course, because the city and the FOP probably seen something that was working and benefiting African Americans. So that's what that program did. It benefited African Americans.
And for those of you who sit out there and want to get into that, we have about 10 minutes left to get into this conversation about tokens or you got the job by consent decree, or what's the other thing that they have, where they were taking a proportion of numbers, whatever. Let me just say this, and I'm going to use the president of the Guardian Civic League, Miss Crystal Williams, retired police officer, retired police detective. Let me say this. If you're a token, or if you were able to get the job only because we needed to get more African Americans on the job, you couldn't have survived 32 years
That's true.
on the job. Number one, you would have been pressured out in one or two, at least. You would not have spent 8 years in the Special Victims Unit. And you definitely would not have spent 16 years in the Homicide Unit. Do you know what it takes to be a homicide detective?
Yes.
Folks, and stay sober. We're laughing, but we know it's true.
And let me reiterate on my second day on the job, I got in the car with this white officer, and he says to me, "What are you doing here? Why are you here? You should be home with your kids somewhere. Why are you working with me?" And I told him, "I will be with you for 8 hours." And I did.
These are the type of things that young African-American officers will run into in their career, especially the first couple of years of your career. The thing of it is that you have to have mentors, as Bill has talked about, as Crystal has talked about, who will stick with you, who are sometimes just a phone call away. Today we have text messages. We didn't have text then, but who are just a communication away from helping you around some of these hurdles you may run into.
Right.
And we're not, unfortunately, they're here from both of these police officers are from Philadelphia, as I am. But the things that we're talking about are national.
Yes,
they're national in scope. And the hurdles that we're talking about, they're national. They're not just happening in Philadelphia. And that's the reason for this program. You have the vice chairperson of the National Association of Black Law Enforcement Officers. She's talking to people nationally. And this is what they are bringing. Bill, vast experience. I mean, not just with policing in Philadelphia, but I'm sure with a lot of the training that you would have. I don't want to get too detailed into it, but you were traveling all over the country, or probably different parts of the country, interacting with police officers from different parts of the country for a lot of the training that you had.
And Norman, just like you said, this is not a Philadelphia issue. That's why the national organizations were formed, because these same issues were going around in all throughout the country. And some folks were able to resolve some issues. So we wanted to hear how they resolve those issues. And that's why we formed the national organizations. What Crystal didn't tell you, Norman, and you'll be able to identify, Crystal's assignment when she first came out of the academy was the 25th district.
Oh,
yes.
So,
yes, that was my
now
assignment.
I understand.
That was my assignment.
Yeah.
So we're talking about a Black female in the 25th district.
That's right.
That definitely didn't like Black folks and definitely didn't want no Black female. They would tolerate a white female, but they definitely would not tolerate the Black females. And that's where I first met Crystal, because of a stupid issue that they tried to bring on her and some other Black folks down in the 25th district. And that's why I had to go down there and talk. And Norman, the issue was so childish that when I left out the office with the captain, when he brought the lieutenant in, who I knew from the 23rd district, and once we had our conversation, they would not bother them anymore, because that's how childish the issue was, and they knew I knew he was a racist.
Mm.
Okay. But
Mm.
we formed these. This is in Atlanta. I remember the folks from Atlanta when I was with the national organization, and Atlanta joined us. Throughout Chicago, LA, Houston, Dallas, Texas, just all over, St. Louis. We were all over, and all these same issues. And they still go today, by the way. These issues still are going on today. Even though we have African Americans in the top position, we still have the same issues.
Yeah.
I wonder why.
Yep.
You know.
Well, and a lot of them are members of Noble. But anyway.
Thank you. Thank you. But I wonder why.
Yeah. I think that yeah, and then we just, and I don't want to get too deep in the weeds here, and we only have a little bit of time, but I think one of the loneliest persons that we have right now is someone whom I mentored as a rookie police officer, who's now in the position of deputy commissioner in Philadelphia. And I think she's feeling very much alone right now. And I don't hear anyone from Noble speaking up for her or the predicament that she's in, having been involved in a situation that her Caucasian counterparts have been involved in for years and have never, and there's never been anything adverse done to them. And now we have a female deputy police commissioner in a historic position, because you've never had an African-American deputy police commissioner. And now, and she was just on the precipice of being the Philadelphia police commissioner. So when you get that high and you're still victimized by the same people who couldn't get to you when you're a little bit younger, now here they are now in a position to damage you. But anyway, want to thank you guys for being on my program today. We're really up against the clock. It's been very, very informative. And the one thing that I've been trying to do is feature African-American police leaders, police officers. I'd love to get someone on from Noble. I don't know whether it will ever happen, but and speaking for not only for themselves, but also for Noble. But I really appreciate your guys, Crystal.
You're welcome.
And Bill, I really appreciate it. At some point we may come back and revisit this topic, because one thing I'd like to do is be able to revisit it somewhere down the road that we can show progress,
Yes.
where we can show that at least one something has been done. And you know,
I'm with you, Norman.
We hope.
Anytime you need me, I know, and I can speak for Crystal. I'm sure of. I know she's willing and able anytime you need us.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I would just like to close out, folks, by saying that I began this program by saying the more things change, the more things stay the same. And what, if you've been listening throughout this program, what you have seen is that the people who can obviously make positive contributions into making things change and making things better are not listened to. They're not sought out. And as long as you seek out the same people, we're going to continue to have the same problems in policing. Nothing will change. You'll continue to see African Americans being killed unnecessarily. You will continue to see police brutality heaped upon minority communities, and things will stay the same. We want change. We want it now, not 10 years or 20 years from now. I want to see it in my lifetime. I thank you all for listening to WCEG.
And we thank you.
Thank you, Norman.
Thank you very much.
Crystal, see you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.